Ed, you may want to mute your phone or whatever was making the noises.
Why don't we just wait another couple of minutes and then we can.
We're still waiting for the speaker, Brendan. So
Yeah, and he confirmed last night, so we should be good to go.
Okay.
Hopefully he'll jump on in the next few minutes.
Okay. Otherwise, you fill in.
It's a lot of content I am not prepared to cover, but and there's Brendan. Good, we're good to go.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Brendan, thank you for joining us. We're letting people jump on board right now and logging in. Thank you. It's great to see you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
We're just going to wait another couple of minutes and then we'll start.
Okay, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
No, thank you for coming. We just were saying it's a very busy news day.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Question.
Yes, it is.
Okay, Rita's here. I know she was coming. Okay, should we start?
yeah, would you like me to read the?
Yeah, go
Um,
ahead. Do your spiel.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, well, welcome to everybody. If this is your first time joining us at one of our virtual meetings, everyone will remain muted throughout the entire meeting except for the committee co-chairs and our presenters. Following the presentation, the co-chairs will call on members of the public wishing to speak and ask questions about the presentation. You can engage and participate by going to the reactions icon at the bottom of your screen and pressing the raise hand button. Not the wave or the thumbs up, those will disappear. Press it only once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're calling in from the phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs call on you. The chat is available for technical support only to help with the Zoom software problems. It's not to ask questions of the co-chairs or the presenter. They will not see those chats. If you have an older version of Zoom, you will need to go to the participants section where you'll find the raise hand feature there. And finally, please do not actually raise your human hand. We may miss it and not call on you. And you can always chat me if you're having any problems with the software. With that, I'll turn it back over to Barbara and Greg and Ed.
Okay, thank you. And just behalf of myself, Barbara Chockey, Ed Herzeg, and Gregory Morris, we want to welcome you to the April Housing Committee meeting. I think it's going to be an interesting meeting. And we'll now go. Gregory, you want to introduce the speaker, please?
Sure. So, the last time we gathered together, I think we had a really interesting presentation from the folks at Citizens Housing and Planning Council to continue this effort to learn and educate and inform ourselves about housing issues in the state and the city. We've invited Brendan Cheney to join us. He is the Director of Policy and Communications, the New York Housing Conference. Brendan, we're very, very happy to have you. We're very grateful. I wish there was a larger audience. I'm very thrilled that this group is with us. As we said before we started, there's a lot going on in the world right now. So we know folks have a lot on their plate, but I think your ability to share with us the New York State enacted budget, some details related to that, and also digging into your thoughts and some of the data or some of the recommendations about what our next mayor should be thinking about specific to housing would be great for this committee to take under its sort of advisement and ask good questions as we think about what it's going to take to fulfill one of our district needs statements. In fact, the top of it, which was thinking about affordable housing in particular in CB8. On that note, Will, I guess you want to just offer the accessibility to the presentation. I don't know if you have a presentation, Brendan, or you're just going to talk. It's up to you. We're here for you.
Great. So what I was thinking was sort of there's two things you wanted me to talk about. One is the state budget. The other is the mayoral campaign and sort of our work around that. I think on the state budget, unless anybody would rather see sort of the webpage where we have the information, I was going to sort of talk through it. And then I've got a PowerPoint I can use for the mayoral work that we're doing.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Good.
So I'll start with the state budget. Albany, the governor and the legislature recently passed and signed the state budget for the 2021-2022 year. And there's some interesting housing provisions in there, and there's some things that we're hoping will be in there for next year. And so I'll sort of go through what is in there for this year. I think the biggest thing that we were looking for and paying attention to was how the state was going to use the federal emergency rental assistance. I don't know how many people were paying attention to this. If sort of this
We had a couple of meetings about it, so we were.
Okay, great. So so the issue was like how, whether the legislature was going to sort of create the program needed to spend this money, right? There's about $50 billion nationally, and the expectation is that New York State's going to get about $2.3 billion for emergency rental assistance in response to all the people that are sort of insecure in their housing because of the pandemic and the economic recession due to the pandemic. And so the legislature did create a program to spend the $2.3 billion. They also added another $100 million in state funding on top of that. So the program will be roughly around $2.4 billion, and the state money might go to cover things that the federal money doesn't cover. Let me know how deep you want me to go into that. There's a lot of things we really looked at and talked about. I don't know how much really so interesting to everyone here. There was the what the federal government created in the program, and then some of the things the state added on to or revised. But pretty much what we have is a program to help low income renters and owners. The money goes to the owners ultimately, so that the renters back rent is paid and the owners can use that money as they would for rent to for low income renters who are have had unemployment or reduction of income or other costs due to COVID-19 and can demonstrate a risk of homelessness. So I'd say shout at me if you want me to sort of go deeper, but that's sort of the gist of the program is $2.3 billion federal plus the $100 million in additional state money.
And was that the number that you thought, is that the right number? Is that low? Is that high? Is that surprising? Just to sort of think about that for a second.
Yeah, I think the federal money is what it is, and then having $100 million of state money on top of that, I think, when I think back to where we were 6 months ago, 8 months ago, looking at the need for federal money and there was, on my end, there's an assumption at the time that the state wouldn't really be able to help out because of the state's financial situation, and that the state is able to actually help out and put in some extra money, I think is positive. We still need to see exactly how they're going to use that $100 million. But I think it's positive that additional money was put in. And so I think it was a pleasant surprise for me.
Ed, I see your hand up. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, Brendan, I was wondering, maybe I'm conflating issues, or maybe you're going to talk about this a little later. There was a story I thought I'd seen or read about these rental assistance programs. Maybe it's from the federal to the states, but there seems to be a great deal of backlog with respect to actually getting it in people's pockets. And I don't know if that's related to this particular program or something else, or I'm just misremembering. Like you said, it's been a busy news day and a busy news week. So apologies all around if I'm conflating or confusing.
No, that's a really good point. And I'm glad you brought that up in case I was gonna sort of leave that out. But the legislation creates the program, and I think we are, quite frankly, a little frustrated that the program that the legislation created it in legislation, but the the executive still needs to actually roll out the program. They need to get the application out. They need to set up, whatever interface they will use for people to be able to sign up for it and apply for it, and train people and get it up and running. And I think we've been disappointed and frustrated that it's been taking this long, and we're still advocating strongly to get it up and running as quickly as possible. But you're absolutely right that it has, in New York State, has taken longer than I think we thought it should, as they were working on the legislation and negotiating the legislation and now trying to get the program up and running. I think there should be some real urgency here. And, the state's eviction moratorium expires May 1st, right? So the program's not up and running yet. Hopefully it'll start maybe getting applications out and accepting applications in mid-May or so. But that's after the moratorium expires. I'm hearing that Albany's going to extend the eviction moratorium till maybe August or something like that. But
That's what I heard too. So
Yeah. And so, I mean, not to belabor the point, but just in terms of like number, so none of that money has gotten into anybody's pockets, right? Or we just all still just
no,
sitting there.
so there was $100 million that the state set up from the CARES Act back in last March.
Right.
And, I think that program had some difficulty getting the money out also. Out of the 100 million, half-ish got into people's pockets. And so, so some of it did get out, but some of it didn't. And now the second rounds have not gotten out.
Okay, now I promise this is the last one. I promise I'm not going to, because I know we're trying to get out a decent hour here. When do you think, they'll get to, I mean, I guess not. The question is, does this money expire? Like if we don't, it's authorized and it's not, sent out, spent within a certain period of time. Is there a window on the authorization for the money that, if they don't get their act together within 2 years or 3 years, they're like, okay, you're not going to do it. And the money goes back into the general fund.
Yeah, there's a couple things on that. I think it's, I think that, the 2.3 billion was in two different bills. And I think they each had slightly different sort of end dates for when the money has to be spent. But, I think it was roughly 18 months or something like that. The expiration date doesn't worry me quite as much as there is a provision in one of the bills that, if you spend the money quickly, then there might be an extra pot of money from people who are not spending it to be allocated to you based on your high needs. And if we're not doing that, then maybe we're not open to that opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, thanks.
Okay. So great, thank you for bringing that up, and it is really important that and we're sort of doing a lot of advocacy to try and get really move quickly on this more quickly. So that was the rental assistance from the federal program, and in addition to the 100 million that's connected to the federal program, there's another 100 million for sort of for transitional rental assistance, and local governments can create a program and apply for some of that funding. So it's another sort of tranche of $100 million for rental assistance.
Is that another case where there's no plan in place? It's just in the budget?
yeah, how is that supposed to work?
So I haven't seen anything lately on that, but my understanding is that local jurisdictions can create a program and like to have that money, to have some share of that money for their program.
You mean the state who creates the program, or the local, the state or New York City? I mean,
So for example, New York City would sort of design a program and apply for some of that money to go to their program.
okay.
So what else? There was $325 million in the state budget for public housing across the state, 200 million for NYCHA, New York City Housing Authority, and 125 million for public housing authorities across the state. And that's to go for capital funding. So weatherization, heating, elevators, lead remediation, other maintenance projects. And so, you know, we've been advocating for a long time for state, city, and federal resources to go to repair public housing. NYCHA has $40 billion in repair needs. And so, you know, we are, you know, happy to see some state money in there. I think, you know, we're going to keep advocating for more state money and for sort of a ongoing funding every year for public housing in the state budget. But this is a good step.
It's a beginning.
Exactly.
And again, is that another example where there's no particular strategy in place, just it's sort of plugged in?
Yeah, I don't know. You know, I mean, it seems I don't. That's a good question. I don't exactly know. You know, in the past, some of that money has been held up as they've sort of the legislature and the state and the governor have tried to negotiate how to allocate the money. I'm hoping this won't happen this time, but I don't actually know.
And there's a lot of controversy over the issues of public housing, so that can be affected too.
Yeah. So that's another thing we'll just have to keep tabs on and see how they decide to allocate that. So two last things that I'll sort of mention. There's $100 million for you know, the adaptive reuse, basically to convert hotels and offices to affordable housing. This is a pot of money, especially where there's not a program attached to it, and I think it's because there has been a challenge coming up with a program that everybody would agree to about how you allow hotels and offices to convert and you know, what sort of things you allow them to do. And so there's money there, but I think for some of these pots of money, it's a matter of like, how long will it take them to get the money out? This feels like one where it's unclear whether they'll be able to agree on a program and actually use that money. So that's another thing on top of. And then lastly, there's $250 million in the budget for supportive housing. I mention that because the governor had a 5-year housing plan, and this is the last year of that housing plan for affordable housing. And then they added a 6th year because the supportive housing plan, which was supposed to be connected, sort of started a year early. So 6 years and then 5 years of the affordable housing plan. That's important because, you know, we're advocating for them to start the next 5-year plan. We wanted them to do that in this budget. They haven't. But there is funding for this year to do that, but we're going to be advocating very strongly for them to start that over again in next year's budget. And, you know, having a 5-year plan creates predictability for developers who are looking to build affordable housing. And so we really think there should be a 5-year plan so that you can really have a pipeline. If somebody's going to start a project, they know they might not really, you know, they might buy the land soon and it might take a couple of years to get the project going, and to know that money's going to be there in 3 years is important for people to plan and do this work. So we'll be really advocating for another 5-year plan to start in the next budget, which is next year. So those are all the things I felt like were the big housing issues in the state budget. If there's any other questions or anything you didn't hear about that you want to hear about, I can sort of look at my notes and see if I can help you with that.
And our concern is always what we get in our community board area, because we don't get a lot of the money for affordable or supportive housing. That's been an ongoing fight for us.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I guess a lot of the money is going to come through developers through the projects that they work on. I think that's part of it, but I'll be honest, I don't have a great detailed knowledge about sort of the local end of these things.
I see Aubrey has a question.
Yeah, sorry about that. Just quickly, as it relates to housing, was there anything in the budget as it related to either senior housing or any type of health-related housing, for instance, assisted living programs? Thank you.
That's a good question. What I can say, first of all, is that I think for any of those programs that existed, my understanding is that those programs sort of continue at the same level. So I'm sort of looking through
I'm on a Zoom.
detailed information. Let's see. So like there's a program, Housing Opportunities Program for the Elderly, looks like is $1.4 million. And so that's the same as it was last year. And is there anything else? That's the only one that jumps out at me. And that's the only one that jumps out at me. I think assisted living programs might not be in the housing budget that I look at. Yeah.
This is a lot of questions we don't know yet.
I see Rita with her hand up. Rita, you want to jump in?
Yeah.
When they say affordable, do they define affordable? Because this has been a pet peeve, to be correct about, a pet peeve as to what's affordable. And do they define it? I mean, they say that they're putting all this money into it, but do they know what they're putting it into? Or is it going to be same old, where people who really need the housing are not going to get it?
Affordable to who?
Right.
Affordable to who?
Yeah. So that's a good question. I mean, I think I think the way they define it broadly is affordable housing is housing that is where the rent or the, if it's home ownership, the sale price is restricted in some way. And then the actual levels of affordability, I think, are just determined by the programs. And so I don't see any sort of, there was nothing in the budget that suggested they were changing how they were targeting affordability. Sometimes it can be project by project, but anyway, it's based on the programs, and I didn't see any indication they were sort of changing that.
Affordable used to be, am I still unmuted?
Yes,
Go ahead.
you're-
Yeah, you're okay.
Affordable used to be a percentage of the AMI, and 100% was finite. I mean, you can't have more than 100% cup of coffee. That's what you get, a cup of coffee. It's 100% of it. However, developers have taken it to another level, and the mayor has gone along with it. And on Roosevelt Island, which was supposed to be totally affordable, a new building just went up, partially affordable, and the affordable AMI was 185% AMI, which means that nobody in the surrounding area, because that's what it means, average median income of the surrounding area. Nobody in the surrounding area, which was Queens for Roosevelt Island, could afford to go there. So it was really playing to people who really could afford to live someplace else, but chose to live here. So I'm thrilled to hear all these numbers. I am not thrilled to hear that there are no restrictions and no caps and no, we're going to have the same thing. It's going to be affordable for those at the upper level, and the people in the middle and the bottom they're not even considered. Thank you. It's not you. It's
No, and I think we I think that we can talk more about this later too, when I talk about the mayoral campaign that we're working on, because that is a big focus of ours, to really focus on where the housing need is, which is at the lowest incomes. But yeah, I think that work to get that affordable housing targeted to the lowest incomes is advocacy at the mayor and the governor to ensure that the programs they're using are and the subsidies they're using are focused on the incomes where there's the greatest housing need.
Right. If I can, I know I see Peggy has her hand up, but I was just gonna, if I could jump in.
Go to the public. Can we go to the public first? If anybody else from the public wants to speak, please.
Just a friendly reminder to use the raise hand feature under the reactions button at the bottom of your screen, or hit *9 if you're calling in from the phone.
Oh, if I could for a second, I was going to say, you know, Rita raises the point, the issue we talk about when we have these new developments. For instance, and again, just throwing around numbers for argument's sake, say the folks living at the site of the new development are at, say, 40% of AMI, just pick a number. And the new development comes in, they have affordable housing as part of that, but what they find is that, you know, the affordable housing starts at 70% of AMI. And, you know, all the people who are there, you know, to Rita's point, are not able to afford the apartments that are affordable that are there now, that have just been built. Like, you know, the example is Roosevelt Island. And I think they also get a little whipsawed because they're part of New York County, right? They're part of our community boards. They're part of New York County, which is Manhattan. So that number may or may not be higher with the AMI. Anyway, just kind of, maybe talk more about that when we get to the city race and the mayoral race.
Peggy, you want to jump in?
Yeah.
The federal government has determined that people should not be spending more than 30% of their income on housing. And this is across the board, across incomes. Now, most people probably do spend more than 30% of their income on housing, one way or the other, rental, ownership, whatever. But I'm wondering if there's something that our committee could define to, especially if we're going to be talking about the mayoral raise and stuff, something we could say to the city that we think should be a number for affordable housing in our community, and really sort of take the initiative on defining what affordable is for us, especially if the state is a little iffy about what falls under the rubric of affordable housing. I mean, is that something that we could come up with, we could make a statement about?
I'll be afraid they'll put it too high. They really fight us on that. They would want it high for this community.
But what if we said something?
Well, I don't know who, yeah, we could try. It's a lot on the individual development.
You know, I think, you know, one of the things I'll talk about later on in the mayoral campaign is that one of the things we recommend is that, you know, there should be a citywide plan to address the citywide housing crisis, but that every community should be a part of that plan and should sort of set goals and targets for how much affordable housing is in their district. And so I think this conversation you guys are having makes a lot of sense. And I think that citywide, the idea is looking at where is the housing need, right, at what incomes, and then how do we sort of address that housing need at those incomes citywide in sort of every neighborhood.
And Aubrey, you want to jump back in? I see your hand up, Aubrey.
Hi, sorry, I just had to unmute myself. I just wanted to add to the conversation about really how we define affordable. And I think years ago, the way we defined affordable by AMI and whatnot had a purpose, but times have changed. And I'm going to go ahead and I'll use myself as an example. And I don't mind disclosing personal financial information, but you know, I moved down here 5 years ago from Buffalo, New York. And we know the housing market between Buffalo and New York is incredibly different. But you know, I took a job with a healthcare organization, and my salary was $125,000 a year. So it was decent. But the other component of it was, you know, my health insurance was completely paid for. I had great benefits, et cetera. But when you look at what my take home was. Bi-weekly, I was taking home about $2,400 every other week. My rent was $2,600 for a small 1-bedroom. To put it in context, just sort of in jest, in Buffalo, my house that I owned was 6,000 square feet and only cost $1,900, but I digress. But when I think of affordability, I think of the rent compared to what our take-home income is. And, we're paying federal, state, and local taxes, but then there are also other costs that I really think need to be included in the equation. Student loans, for one. I mean, years ago, you left college without having any student loans. I feel, I'm fortunate that my student loans aren't as high as some of my friends, but I still pay around $700 a month in student loan payments. And then on top of it, you have commuting costs. When I came to New York, I did get rid of my car. But, you add in a monthly Metro pass, you add in, if you have to take an Uber from time to time or whatnot, or a taxi, it all adds up. And that salary of, $125,000 with, one full paycheck going to pay for my rent, not even quite paying for rent, we're still coming up short. And then adding everything else, you're really not left with much. And, you ask most people around the country, $125,000 would be considered a decent salary, but not so in New York City, where when you take into account the cost of rent. And even when I looked at moving out to Westchester and whatnot, I mean, rent in Westchester is just as bad. A 1-bedroom was going to run $2,200, so not quite as bad, but still, I mean, it's jump. So I think we really need to think about how we define affordable and what goes into that calculation. So with that, I'll put myself back on mute, but I just wanted to add some additional thoughts to that.
Thanks, Audrey. Good thoughts.
And I want to make sure we're able to pivot to the city conversation. Rita, do you have a question? Because if you can wrap us up, and then we can pivot to the city piece, if that's okay.
The AMI is decided by HUD, and we need to do, I would like to see them doing spot checks, because in the AMI for New York City, it includes Westchester, which is very upscale. So, but you could do spot checks through the census and find out what the average income is for people living there. And if you're going to build a new building and you want those people to move in, even if you push them up a little bit, you know where you're pushing them. We don't have that now. It should be that way, but we have a mayor who is very, very easy with developers. Can you put something into the things that you're working on that some caps? I mean, there are numbers out there. You don't have to make them up. Even if you use the federal AMI numbers. But you can't go over 100%. It doesn't exist, only on a developer's mind. If he needs 185%, then he's not offering, but he's getting a tax break. He's the one who's getting the affordable, not us. So can you put it into your hopper for the future?
If that's, yeah, I mean, look, I think that one of the things we say in our report is that one of the recommendations we make is that the next mayor should develop housing that's targeted to where the housing need is, right? And the data shows very clearly the housing need is at the extremely lowest income. And then what you'll see is that one of our core recommendations is that what we want to get away from is a big unit target, right? 300,000 units over 12 years. What that does is it incentivizes the administration to build as many units as they can, sort of regardless of what the housing need is. You might do that building units that are the cheapest instead of building units that require the most subsidy, but are for the deepest incomes, right? But one of the things we do say is we do want a target for the lowest income. And so what you'll see is that we're calling for the next mayor to commit to a minimum target of 8,000 units per year for extremely low income and New Yorkers experiencing homelessness. And so that's 30% of AMI for New Yorkers who are homeless. And so I think we think that having that target, 8,000 units for 30% of AMI or lower, is an aggressive way to really address the housing needs for the very lowest incomes, like you're talking about.
Thank you.
Well, on that note, Brendan, do you want to switch over into your New York City mayoral recommendations presentation?
Yes.
I don't know if he's doing recommendations.
Oh, I'm sorry, the presentation regarding things that the new administration should know or think about.
Yes. All right. Let me see if I can share my screen.
You should be able to.
Thank
There it
you.
is.
And
Go.
here we go. So I guess I forgot to fully introduce myself at the beginning. I am the Director of Policy and Communications at the New York Housing Conference. The Housing Conference is a statewide affordable housing advocacy organization, and we advocate for housing resources, housing investment, and housing policy at the city, state, and federal level. And we are also leading this campaign called United for Housing. And so what United for Housing is a group of originally 80 plus members, now 90 members with expertise in housing and real estate, but also homelessness and healthcare and criminal justice and finance, coming together to sort of develop consensus recommendations around affordable housing for the next mayor. So we started our work in September of 2019, meeting with the full group, meeting with smaller working groups to develop this lengthy list of recommendations. And then we also solicited community feedback at some forums in the fall. And what I'll do real quick is just sort of show you the list of organizations to give you a sense of who is involved in this. It sounds like you guys met with Citizens Housing and Planning Council last week, so they were one of the members. But there's groups like the Association for Neighborhood Housing Development, we've got developers, for-profit, nonprofit, organizations that focus on homelessness, like I said, the Supportive Housing Network of New York, service organizations. So, and we're now up to about 90 organizations that have signed on or contributed from the beginning. So when we started our work, we started by developing some guiding principles, right? Like, what are the principles that we want to help us focus our work and focus on what do our recommendations want to achieve? And so these are the guiding principles: confront and undo a legacy of systemic racial discrimination in housing and homeownership, prioritize the preservation of public housing in a citywide housing plan, expand affordable housing supply through preservation and development, improve housing affordability for the lowest income New Yorkers, and reduce homelessness through coordinated housing and homelessness policy. And so from there, we came up with first our sort of big recommendation, the one that we're really, pushing out to all of the campaigns, and that is an investment of $4 billion per year in housing capital for affordable housing from the city. And so that's $1.5 billion for the New York City Housing Authority per year. And we hope the next mayor will work with the state to get the state to match that every year. And then $2.5 billion for HPDs, affordable housing preservation and new construction. And, again, focused on homeless and extremely low income New Yorkers and supportive housing. Together, that's $4 billion, and that's roughly doubling what the city spends now. Just to give some context, it's roughly double what the city spends now on housing.
Double, you said?
Yep. And then plus $200 million per year in rental assistance, also matched by New York State. And then from there, we also developed detailed recommendations in 5 issue areas. So when I said we divided up into smaller working groups, these were the working groups. There's work on public housing, new construction, preservation of affordable housing, housing poverty and homelessness, and home ownership. And so I'll sort of go through big picture what the recommendations were in each of these issue areas. So for public housing, we're calling on the next mayor to prioritize public housing in the next housing plan. Right, instead of separating it to have a public housing plan and then an affordable housing plan, that they should be part of the same thing. 1.5 billion in capital from the city and state, like I said, greater resident engagement in the planning and execution of NYCHA policies, and improved management and operations. For new construction, calling the next mayor to make a major investment in mixed income housing targeted to the most pressing needs, and that is targeted to the lowest incomes. Collaborate with the state on city-state multi-year housing plans, upzone higher income areas and use non-budgetary tools to increase supply, make every community part of the citywide housing plan with affordable housing supply goals. So I talked about that a little bit earlier, and then decrease the costs of construction and development. For preservation, we recommend next mayor expand and readapt HB programs to preserve market and regulated rental properties, to continue affordability and prevent disinvestment, support limited equity models of home ownership, convert hotels and high opportunity neighborhoods into affordable and supportive housing, and maintain and uphold housing quality standards through code enforcement. And then housing poverty and homelessness, we recommend the next mayor have 1 deputy mayor responsible for housing and homelessness. I think instead of having like sort of separate homelessness plans and housing plans, they're together under 1 deputy mayor, then the 2 plans would work together. You've got a housing plan that is really trying to help address the homelessness crisis in New York City. Minimum production target of 8,000 units per year for ELI means extremely low income, and that's 30% of AMI. So for ELI and homeless New Yorkers. Now, what you'll see if you look at the report is we break that down a little bit further. And I think what we say is 3,000 units for homeless New Yorkers, 2,000 for ELI, 2,000 for supportive housing, and 1,000 for seniors, I think. I might be getting my numbers mixed up. Maybe I'll come back to that and confirm. But the idea is that we're breaking that down to have targets specifically for New Yorkers experiencing homelessness, for extremely low income New Yorkers, for supportive housing, and for senior housing with some services on site. Prevent homelessness by targeting institutional touch points. And what that means is that there are people who are, on the verge of becoming homeless, and they interact with certain systems. And if we can find them working in those systems and prevent homelessness at that point, we can prevent homelessness, right? So it's someone who might be leaving a hospital but doesn't have somewhere to go. It might be someone leaving state prison and doesn't have somewhere to go. It might be someone, a youth leaving foster care that doesn't have a home to go to. So finding people in those situations and making sure they have housing, and if they don't have housing, lined up to help them get housing. Expand programs that promote stability and prevent homelessness, and create housing in high income areas. And then finally on home ownership, we talk about the need to increase the supply of owner occupied affordable housing, to create faster, more accessible down payment assistance, to create alternatives to the tax lien sale, to expand funding and support for basement apartments and accessory dwelling units, and to create a pathway into tenant or community-based ownership for rental buildings that go up for sale or are on the cusp of losing their affordable status. So, and this is the presentation we've used when we've met with the mayoral candidates. And, one of the things we talk about in the report is that we think the next mayor needs to find a different way to measure success of their housing plan. That having one numerical target means you're working towards that target. You can achieve that target without improving affordability or, decreasing instability, and addressing other needs through housing, like improving health and other things like that, right? You're overlooking health factors. You might be overlooking neighborhood segregation, things like that. So we're sort of asking them, like, what are you going to do? How are you going to measure your success so that your housing plan is addressing affordability, homelessness, NYCHA, segregation, things like discrimination, things like that. And so that is the end of the presentation. So I can stop my share and happy to talk about anything else, anything in more detail, answer any questions.
Did you have any forum with the candidates on these issues? I mean, is that going to go public? I mean, what the candidates said?
Yeah, so we co-hosted a forum, and I can put the link to it, so if anybody's curious to watch.
That would be interesting to, yeah.
Yeah, let me find that link real quick in a few minutes and put that in the chat. But it was on New York One. I think it was in March, although at this point, all the dates sort of blur into my head. But it was with New York One and the NYU Furman Center on New York One. It was hosted by Errol Lewis, and it had the 8 leading candidates at the time. So that, that means it was Scott Stringer and Eric Adams. It was John Donovan and Ray McGuire. It was Diane Morales and Andrew Yang, and Maya Wiley and Catherine Garcia.
Okay, yeah. I don't know if I don't remember I saw that one.
Yeah, let me get the link for that and share it. But so they, and in that forum, they sort of, were asked questions about most of these issues, about public housing and homelessness and affordability and, racial discrimination and, how much they were going to spend, I think, on housing.
Can we put that on under our committee, Will, or is that too, like, would that be considered like public information, or is that too political because it's a candidate forum?
I would have to share it with our general counsel and see what she says.
Okay. I mean, just, informationally speaking, just so.
Yeah, I mean, I think we, as a 501c3, we sort of, did our best to present it as a nonpartisan event. We invited the leading 8 candidates, regardless of party affiliation. It happened to be all candidates that are running in the Democratic primary, but based on our criteria of fundraising and polling, we just invited the 8 leading candidates to avoid any sort of appearance of partisanship. But I understand you guys can sort of.
Yeah, well, if they did it, we probably can do it too. I mean, I don't see why we can't.
I mean, you could. I mean, maybe you might even have one after the primary for the major parties. You might have one between June and December. Then it would, whatever.
Yeah. Yep.
Just to get the issues out there, so people have another opportunity to see more discussion, more information.
Yeah.
I see Rita and Sandrea.
New York.
Aubrey had their hand up. Maybe we go to Sandrea. She hasn't said anything.
Okay. Yes. Hello. Greetings. Ooh, I'm outside, so sorry. Yes. Greetings all. I'm glad that you mentioned youth that are aging out of foster care, because that is a huge problem in New York City. Can you speak a bit further on your recommendations, if you all had any, and were the mayoral candidates receptive, or to your suggestions, if you made any? And how would it look?
Yeah, sure. So I will say a couple things. One is, I'll start with the forum. We were planning the forum with New York One, with the New York University Furman Center. And that was one of the questions that Errol Lewis really wanted to ask. Sort of, it's not a huge number of youth that age out of foster care. I think it's an order of magnitude, 100 or so that age out and into homelessness. And you sort of said,
I think it's underreported though. I think it's underreported though, because
definitely
there's an issue. Yeah.
I think the idea that Errol Lewis was trying to show at the forum was that this is a population size that is somewhat manageable if there's a commitment to it. And he sort of said, like, you know, do you commit to ensure that nobody leaves foster care into homelessness under your administration? And they also, you know, sort of lightning round, yes or no, what do you, you know, and they all said yes to that, which I think was promising.
They're not going to say no, love. They wouldn't say no.
Well, you know, my feeling was that if it's a, you're right, there is the pressure to just say yes to something like that. I think that if and whoever gets elected does have to actually deliver on that. But I also feel like if it was a, you know, few of the candidates are saying they're going to have zero homelessness in their administration. I think a couple are, but I think others recognize that's a huge problem, a huge issue in terms of scale, and so it was promising that there seems to be some commitment to that. But you're absolutely right that there's the incentive to say yes, and they have to deliver on it.
Can I jump in real quick and follow up on Sandra? Why is there such a problem with the undercounting? Like, if we're not getting the correct number, if there's a larger population,
because you wouldn't really know. You wouldn't really know. You know, I'm on a board that we run a program. I'm on a homeless board that we actually run a program. I think it was one of the first ones of kids who are Asian out of foster care. It's a residential program, and some of those you don't. It's very hard to keep account because you don't have proper reports. If people are living in Grand Central Station or living in the subway, you wouldn't know that they used to be in foster care.
Well, but we knew they were in there. My question is, if they're in foster care, and we know they're in foster care, so we have a record of them.
But so when they leave, when you leave, there's no record anymore. They don't keep track of them once they leave. The city agencies don't.
You know,
so why don't we let Brenda weigh in? Go ahead.
I've seen a couple of the hearings on this. I'm certainly not an expert on this population specifically. I think there's a couple of things. One is that, like, as a population that you know, youth in particular, unaccompanied homeless youth are a population that are sort of hard to measure and hard to track. They might not be using services. You know, the city goes out and tries to count the number of people who are homeless one night a year, and so they try and capture that population. But I think getting an accurate count on how many youth are unaccompanied homeless that are sometimes couch surfing, sometimes on the street, is really challenging. But in terms of, you know, youth leaving foster care, I think that, you know, my knowledge might be a little bit out of date, but there is a sense that in theory, the providers are supposed to be talking to the city, and the providers are supposed to be sort of talking to the youth and finding out who has a plan for where they'll go and who doesn't. But I don't know that they've been good at tracking that and good on delivering on that expectation. And I think that, then you can also track if the youth does come into the shelter, in theory, they get that history, and that history might be a history of foster care. So there, you know, I think there is still some challenge in really getting an accurate handle, but they are supposed to be tracking that.
So let's other questions. Aubrey, you had a question? And we'll go to Rita.
Real simple question. As you can know, I'm on the phone, and the mayoral presentation sounded very interesting. Will that be shared by any chance on the website or wherever?
I think we established Will needs to look into whether or not that's something that's shareable. Is that right, Will?
Well, I would just say this, that the YouTube video of tonight's meeting is available on our website and on our YouTube and on our Facebook and on our Twitter.
Is it possible for me to share either our website or my name in the chat, or is that not?
Yeah. Send it to me and I'll put it out into the chat.
Okay, so I'll send my contact information and our website, and we can sort of go from there.
That would not be helpful to Aubrey, though, because he's on the phone. But for everybody else, yes.
Aubrey, then I would just say, if you go to the New York Housing Conference website, you can sort of find a way to get in touch with us that way.
And Rita, you have your hands up. Go ahead.
A contribution to the homeless people or families, or our current affordable housing that is demolished in preparation for a building that is planned for that area. But we have now witnessed in our district that we have a lot of empty, where affordable rent control, rent stabilized apartments were ruined, absolutely demolished, and no building is going on and nothing is happening. Is there any safety net that we could put in for that? If a developer buys land and clears land and whatever it is that he has to develop on it, we have at least 3 or 4 full blocks in this area, and we need affordable housing. We have empty blocks, empty to the ground. Are you addressing any of that?
We don't address that in our report. I know that's something that's come up from time to time. I feel like I remember city council hearings looking into that. That is not something specifically that we address. I mean, I think our hope, our expectation is that, that we're developing as much affordable housing as we can, that on vacant land, that's, one of the best uses you can have for it. But we don't address that specific issue.
Thank you.
So I don't know if you have any additional questions. I guess Brendan, my question to you would be, what specific strategies and approaches do you take to be able to, try to activate some of these recommendations? What do you recommend a community board or committee might do? We hear something that sounds interesting to us. We want to get involved, get educated, get involved. Are there specific steps and strategies you think we should take?
Yeah, so I'd say a couple things. I think first of all, like I said earlier, and this is in our recommendations, and maybe it was in sort of one of the big picture recommendations that was in my PowerPoint, right? But I think we are hoping and I think we'll be encouraging every council district, every community board to be a part of the solution, to be a part of the housing plan, to support affordable housing in the district, in the community board. And so I think that there's the, on the individual level, that as that comes through, to be supportive of affordable housing development, and affordable housing development that matches with, I think we would say with our plan, right? Targeting the deepest affordability, and trying to address the history of discrimination, and improving NYCHA and things like that. I think any support you want to give to the plan itself would certainly be appreciated. And look, I think we want to educate we are educating the campaigns. We're going to educate the council campaigns. After the primary election, I think we'll be able to sort of engage in more one-on-one interactions with the council candidates that have been nominated. And that'll be a chance to encourage them to commit to being a part of the housing plan and commit to supporting affordable housing in the district. And so I think, being supportive of that in any way. And then, the next thing we're doing also is just sort of developing an implementation plan, right? So going up to, we've got these recommendations, but what are the things the next mayor will need to do to implement these recommendations? We're going to be working on that as well. So that's one of the.
What I want to add, Gregory, is people should ask candidates what their positions are and know what their positions are. I mean, I don't know to get too political now, but that's what we have to do. You have to look at the candidates and see where they are and ask the very specific questions. The mayoral candidates, the council candidates, the borough president candidates, we have to ask.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment, and I think then it's a matter of what happens after that, because
well, I know, and I'm very worried.
It's easy to make these recommendations now. It's or make commitments now. It's how do you actually put things into
Well,
action?
that's the problem.
Well,
What do you do afterwards?
yeah, and so I think I think we're still trying to figure out exactly how to do this, but I think that after the elections are over, when there's a new administration in place and a new city council in place, I think there's sort of two things we want to do. One is to work with the administration, help them implement these recommendations, but the other is to really look at the council districts and sort of I think use I guess sort of oversight maybe is the best word I can think of right now, but really look at how much housing is being developed in each district, and is there resistance to affordable housing? Is every district being supportive? And so we've figured out exactly how to, we haven't committed to exactly how we're gonna do this, but that is something we were planning to do, to really monitor that and sort of expect every neighborhood, every district to be a part of the plan.
I think it's important that you don't go away after the election, after the primary, that you stay around.
That's right. And so our plan is to not go away. We sort of have a when we thought about this project, the first phase of the project was developing recommendations. The second phase of the project was implementing engaging with the campaigns to really encourage everybody to support these recommendations. And the third phase is implementation and oversight. And so we're expecting to be doing a lot of that work.
And Brendan, do you mind taking one more question? I see Billy's got his hand up. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
Go ahead, Bill.
Hi, thanks for joining us. I'm going to do something I hate to do, which is I arrived super late. I may have missed whether this was talked about. So you can just say, we discussed it, get out of here, get lost. But in your report, you talk about upzoning wealthier areas. You have a section of upzone high income areas. And so I don't know if this was discussed, but I'm assuming that would include the Upper East Side and Yorkville. And my question would be, given that some of our avenue blocks are already zoned up to the max FAR, how would you see that playing out in a neighborhood like the one we represent? Would you like to see mid-block upzonings? Would you like to see the state raise the FAR cap? And how does that play out in a way that doesn't simply result in more luxury market rate development, but actually genuinely includes some meaningful affordable component? And again, forgive me if that was discussed.
No, that's a good question. I mean, so I will say two things. I'll sort of address the second point first, and then admit that I can't really address the details of the first point, but I'll get to that. On the second point, the idea is that with an upzoning, that there should be a requirement for affordable housing with any development. And that was part of Mayor de Blasio's strategy. I think what we saw, unfortunately, was a lot of upzonings in lower income neighborhoods. And I think that strategy is more effective, and I think more makes more sense in higher income neighborhoods, and really pairing that requirement of affordable housing with that, and that can help bring affordable housing into communities where it's tougher to build straight affordable because of the cost. It's not impossible and it should be done, but I think it's just another tool to bring affordable housing into those places. What we didn't do in the report, and what I can't really do is we didn't name any specific neighborhoods. I mean, we are supportive of the rezoning in Soho, or at least New York Housing Conference is. United for Housing hasn't taken a specific position. I am not. So we didn't name any specific neighborhoods, and I haven't gotten into the weeds well enough to know what specifically we might do in a neighborhood like yours. So really where we are right now is more big picture, like this is a policy that should be adopted whereby we upzone and there's an affordable housing component as part of that.
Thanks for that. I see
Thanks.
Marco's got his hand up. Marco, do you want to jump in? Go ahead.
And then we should go on to the next.
Thank you, Greg.
Agreed. And Brendan, you've been very generous with your time. Go ahead, Marco.
Thank you, Brendan. I know many fellow community members knows about my experience, but I think I had to clarify because I'm going to challenge a lot of things that you said. Yes, I am an architect, a licensed, I practice. I'm a developer. I do development. I contract. I control my own development. I'm a planner. I understand. I'm one of the persons that fight in the community war, especially to maintain the quality of life. The first thing, though, what I think is I had to say thank you for your information. I think it's extremely valuable. I was enjoying reading all of them. I was extremely happy because that part was missing in my equation of expertise in affordable housing. Now, in the other side, I think one of the problems that you have is when you say you want to increase the basement. Basement, first of all, is habitable. You don't you don't need to do anything at all. What probably you try to say is cellars. Cellar is uninhabitable because exactly with the quality of air. And that's basically in those populations that create the problems of COVID. COVID was developed as the major crisis was in Queens. Queens, if you say, is low density, one or two family houses. So the cellar, they have been living people over there, and crowdedness is the biggest problem over there. And that is why the people are dying more in that district specifically. Crowdedness is one of the big issues. So that part, it has to be clarified in your document. I don't think that you are referring to basement. Basement is countable area. You can do, you can create affordable housing without no problem. The problem is cellar. Now, the other situation, and that's basically made me concerned in your report, is I'm reading from right now for the page, I think 37. And that's basically you offered an example. You said $1 billion, you can build 53,000 housing, 5,300 dwelling units and 7,800. Totally combined, 13,000 affordable units you can build in $1 million. I'm sorry to tell you, but I wish that you can find a 75,000 affordable unit to build. I did about 4 years ago one of the last projects, and I had to pay it myself. But I'm very extremely careful in all the expenses because I control all ends. $175,000. If you tell me today that if I can build with $175,000 one affordable unit, one of my developments, impossible. I will tell you right now is between 300 and 300, maybe 400,000. When you build in tall buildings, believe me, until today, I don't find the rationality. But when you build tall buildings with high density, now the prices increase. It should be the opposite, but I don't have no idea. Many professionals, many architects, they are saying that the cost to build in big buildings is more expensive. So my calculations, I did an exercise with Nature Development on 92nd Street, and I studied deeply in that project. Your recommendations, for instance, you generalize all affordable housing, which is wrong. For instance, 92nd Street, one of the worst situations that you can do is improve the quality, improve those apartments. I think is a waste of money because that project is located in a flooding area. And if it's coming another Sunday, it will be a collapse. Oh, they said, oh, let me waste the money of FEMA. Oh, let me put the mechanicals. Yes, they build the mechanicals. That is solid, that is sound. They misuse the floor area. And when you use the floor area, you are wasting the money of the taxpayers. So I think I agree with you, and we need more money. I testified in the state budget last year in favor to bring more money for affordable housing, while another fellow community testified for people that are in jail. Because I think probably these people, they don't understand what is actually the need of the affordable housing. Now, with housing, I'm going to refer now in housing in general. Housing, one of the biggest problems that we are facing right now is the developer, they demolish affordable housing to build luxury housing. So what they do, not only they do that, they don't use the density that they should be used. In one development, they use 1/4 of the maximum floor area or the maximum density, meaning that the apartment will be 4 times more expensive. So the millionaire is going to be afford that. And what's going to happen? We are in the threshold of a new deficit of crisis, middle income housing for people that make larger income. You hear the gentleman that they make $125,000. He is in trouble. He is unable to pay the rent. You're making a large income. So the situation is, in order to resolve one of the problems of affordable housing, is going to the basics, supply and demand. The more supply, the less the less demand, the less expensive is the housing. So that is the main equation that always we have to start thinking. To do that, you have to start thinking first is to prevent the destruction of affordable housing. And that's you address very well in some of the issues, and I agree with you. But the other issue is the higher income that basically those people are going to go hunting the affordable housing and then displace that. Or unpopular programs like people they don't understand or the congestion pricing. Congestion pricing, what it is an inflation that affects the middle and low income families, and they pushing out from wealthy communities to create a social polarization, basically, in other words, create rich city and poor city. So there are several arguments that we can address in your document. And your document is good. I use a lot of information from your document, which basically is missing in my equation. But one of the major concerns that I have is the price of the affordable housing is wrong completely. And that basically, if that is the price, we can house many, many people. In the exercise with I did with NYCHA and 82nd Street, I calculate $1.4 billion to do just only 2,356 affordable units in a period of 12 years. So the numbers, it looks great, but what you're saying, but the problem is the cost is extremely excessive. Now, in our district, we have
Marco, just for the, I'm sorry to interrupt. Just for the sake of time, Brendan has gone past the time that we sort of set aside. So maybe we could just pause there for a second. Brendan, I don't know if you have any thoughts or reactions. Marco's bringing up a lot of points. They're all valuable. Apologies for the interruption, but I just want to be respectful of our guest's time because he's gone a little extra and over for us. Thank you for doing that, Brendan. I don't know if you have any thoughts or reactions in relation to some of what Marco sort of identified as some good stuff and some stuff that he feels strongly, I think maybe needs to be thought about in a different way. If you have any reactions, we welcome it, but I just want to be respectful of your time.
Yeah, I'll just sort of hit on, I sort of appreciate, your input and your feedback. A lot of interesting things to think about. On the basements, my understanding is just that there are basements and accessory dwelling units that are not currently legal in the code. And the idea is to make sure that they are safe, but legal, and sort of add to the housing stock in that way, in a way that is safe and can be affordable either naturally or assisted. The affordability numbers you're talking about, just to be clear, we can sort of talk about this more about how I did it, but it's sort of, the way I looked at it was $1 billion in city capital, city subsidy, and that's going to be in addition to all the other things that go into a typical project. It's not a $1 billion project, right? But the way I sort of calculated it was, you look at a typical deal, how much city capital is in that deal based on the affordability levels in that deal, and then sort of extrapolate that to a much bigger number. If you sort of did every deal just like that, how many units could you build? And what we did there was we compared $1 billion, how much would that get you in really deep affordability, versus $1 billion, how much would that get you in a sort of more mixed income project with some sort of higher, I think we looked at was about some of the units at 120% of AMI and just, less, but a few at basically the, homelessness, extremely low income. And so the idea there was you take $1 billion in subsidy, in addition to the other things that might go into it, like low income housing tax credits and tax exempt bonds and maybe HDC subsidy, things like that. And for $1 billion, it's an exercise to show just how different it is, how much more expensive it is to get really deep affordability, even though I think we are pretty clear that that's our goal and should be the goal of housing policy.
Thank
So
you.
let's pause there. Go ahead, Barbara. Sorry. Go ahead, Barbara.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, happy to be here. Appreciate the opportunity. My email's in the chat, so if anybody wants to follow up, ask any additional questions, I'm happy to talk and happy to resource at any point.
Thank you very much for your time and support. That was a comprehensive start to finish. Really appreciate your time. And, we may call on you again to come be part of our conversations. as we continue to dig in. Thanks once again.
Yeah, very happy to. Thank you, everybody.
Be well.
Good
Thank you.
luck.
Okay. Should we move the agenda?
Yeah, I think, in terms of the agenda, in terms of old business, the old business section was just a reflection on our last meeting. For those of you who may recall, we received a report from the Citizens Housing and Planning Council talking about housing challenges facing us, goals for the future. I'm not sure if folks have reflections based on what they heard today. I think we had some pretty good back and forth to start, but I think the floor is just open at this point.
What I would like to say first.
Go ahead, Barbara.
Our district needs statement, because we do the district needs when we do the budget every year. District needs statement has always had affordable housing as one of our top needs. And our challenge, even though we heard the presentation today, but the challenge is always that we want the affordable housing and real affordable housing in our community.
Right.
We have all these issues. Sometimes they tear down old law tenements, they tear down new law tenements, and then they say they'll give us 4 units in a new building, but the buildings that the affordable units are often not even in our district. And a lot of us would not vote for any development that they don't even put the units, the few we get, in our district. So that's always been, I think that have to be a goal. And I'm still concerned with even the new plan that we're not going to get it. We're not going to get real affordable housing in our district, which is going to be a real challenge. And we have to push it. There's going to be, we had a long zoning committee last night that went to 10:30 or 10 or something. And it's going to be a concern that we have to speak to all the people running for office. And when they get elected, there's going to be a new council, new borough president, new mayor, and new city planning commission. And I think I don't think the goals, if we don't really work on it, is going to get any affordable housing, no matter what type of housing they do. And I want the whole city to get affordable housing, but we really do need it in our district.
I was going to say, just, to build on that a little bit, you're talking about tenements, and I think
I don't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, building on what you were saying, and I think something Rita, I think you brought this up about the vacant lots. You were talking about the vacant lots, right? So I don't know if you all know, on 72nd, right by the subway stop there, all that remains, the small Catholic church is gone. I forgot the name of it. Very small Catholic church on 72nd, just east of, in between 2nd and 3rd. There are 6 tenements left on that corner, but we're going to be getting a new tower on that corner. It's the southwest corner of 72nd and 2nd Avenue. That it's just a matter of time that those tenements fall and that corner is cleared out. Just sort of throwing out in terms of what's coming online in the neighborhood, I think.
I see Marco's hand is up. You want to weigh in, Marco?
Thank you. Sure. Yes, I wasn't able to be last month, but I reviewed the presentation. She's a very interesting lady. She provides another point of view, just in general terms. But the bottom line, again, the issue to resolve affordable housing is we have overdevelopment. Our development is because thanks to free air rights, thanks to the real estate, thanks for the benefits, just only to incentivize to develop in our country, in our community. Thanks to that brings a lot of jobs. I'm in favor of jobs, be careful. So what we had to do is to incentivize to other areas that are underdeveloped. In those areas, we can create jobs. We can develop more affordable housing. We can develop more quality of housing. So in our community, what happened is we has been so far development for the wealthy. And especially right now, what's happening is those medical institutions, not only that they take our air rights and our sunlight, our quality of air, but also they rent large number of affordable housing. Cornell, he has 100 apartments available. Now they seen that why you have to start renting. Now they bought the church on 74th Street. Now they're gonna put a building because they find it that this not only medical is a good real estate business, but also to house their students, their students, especially over there. So our situation is triggered because there is less incentive to incentivize in poor areas, and we create more incentives in our community. So our community is overdeveloped, and that is where we have a congestion traffic, and that's what we have the already overcrowded train queue. If somebody, I will invite all of you, take the train queue at 7:30 in the morning between 64th Street to 72nd Street and see if we can fit that. This is a pack of sardines already. And now the new development, they want to put 1,900 people more in our community. So the situation is of affordable housing is unbalanced. The city has been developed. And this is thanks to what is called in the city council, the deference. Deference is wrong. Deference, they don't even understand what are they doing. They don't want to, well, what I understand, deference is just only the way that is your business, is not my business. When in reality, we are one unit city. We want one council for all the city. We're supposed to work each other in favor of other communities. If we don't address the lower income communities, we never gonna resolve us. Why? Because people are gonna keep investing in our community. So we are losing affordable housing. The rate that I found it is for one affordable housing that we build, 1726 of them are demolished. So we reduce the supply of housing. On the other hand, we have problems of the income. So no income is reachable to pay the 30% that is required by the HUD. So this is kind of the situation that I found it. And this kind of information we need, thanks to, especially for the district needs. In the district needs, we show that the Upper East Side, we have a vacancy rate of 2.8, and the city have 3.6. So that tells you right now that in our community, the deficit of affordable housing is bigger. And that means that many people has to stop eating in order to pay the rent, because those people, they pay more than 30 and 50%. And that is unfair. And we have to work in that direction. Thank you.
Anybody from the public have any remarks or questions? Any other board members?
We have a hand up.
Aubrey.
Aubrey.
Hi, sorry about that. I decided I wanted to get more involved with our community board. So I'll be attending more meetings. I know that today we talked mostly about affordable housing, but there are a number of other housing related issues.
Well, next we're discussing Mitchell Lamas.
Okay. So I'm just wondering, how would I get some of these items on the agenda? Would I just email them maybe?
You can if you want to make recommendations, you can email the community board office.
Okay, I'll go ahead and do that. I just wasn't sure.
You'll be on our mailing list now.
Yeah,
yes, I am. So thank you very much. This has been very insightful, and it sounds like such a wonderful group. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on tonight.
Yes.
Okay, anybody else? Well, thank you. And next month we'll be discussing some ideas from Mitchell Lama.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Rita Popper looks like she has her hand up. Looks like a second from Peggy. Yes.
Okay, thank you, everybody.